people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. I wish I made it up myself. It's by the famous Simon Sinek, but it's true. And so when you're coaching an owner or coaching a staff, it's all about making sure they understand it's not about what we sell. It's not about, how we even do it. It's all important, but it's about if you can't communicate why it's so important for you to do this and why we do this on a personal level, it doesn't matter.
Welcome to the Art of Franchise Marketing. Each episode takes a deep dive into the franchise space and explores how the biggest and best brands handle national branding, franchise development, employee recruitment, and localized marketing on a daily basis. This podcast is brought to you by Netsertive, a localized digital marketing partner for franchise networks. Netsertive's Madeline Park talks shop with franchise executives to discuss what's working, what's not, and answers the question, what else can you be doing to excel at the art of franchise marketing?
All right, welcome back to the art of franchise marketing. I feel like we should have done this years ago, but we're finally here, busy schedule. We got Kory from DRIPBaR here. I know you guys have seen him a lot on the speaking circuit. He's very involved in the franchise community. Kory, thanks for joining today.
For you, only for you, would I make the time to speak, because I'm a busy guy, but for you, no, I'm only kidding. It's a pleasure to be here, of course.
I need you to take my husband through that speech, because usually anyone
good.
but you. I'll talk to anyone but you. So before we get into everything franchising in the DRIPBaR, who is Kory? How did you get here? What are you passionate about? And why franchising?
Man, you ever take Strength Finders 2.0 test where it tells you all about you? So my top 3 descriptions that describe me are achiever, learner, and focus. So I love to hit goals, personally and professionally. I love to learn on, how to do that, how to execute that though. And it takes absolute focus to do so. So, but essentially on the personal note, just a really fun, energetic guy who happened to stumble upon the fitness industry many, many years ago. Now we call it the wellness industry, right? And just had the fortunate ability to move up in a sense, make some great mistakes in my life, which is always essential to learning and growing. And I always tell people you need to fail fast. A lot of lessons you can learn in failing, but don't harp on it. And got me to the point where, now I'm really passionate about being with one of the most fastest growing franchises in the country, in the DRIPBaR.
It's funny. A lot of people say, they stumbled into franchising, and part of me feels like, as you spoke about, like the 3, pillars of your personality and what makes you you. I see that in a trend in a lot of franchise leaders is we fell into it, but I think it's a culmination of, all of our passions and genuinely, helping people, giving back, and also doing that in an entrepreneur manner. So it doesn't shock me that you have fallen in with the greats. You said fitness, and we talked offline about this, but you are a master trainer for Nike. I think we both, have a love for sports, and, I'm all things Nike. Do not put any other brand in front of me.
I fully agree.
I played professional basketball for a while, so I get it. But talk to me about how you got in with that brand, and then, through your experiences there, kind of moved into more of a business sector side. Because I think a lot of people would assume if I'm a trainer now, I can't be the president, the CEO, the founder, the leader of a company. So kind of how'd you make that transition?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the entrepreneurial spirit that draws me to franchising, because on any given day, I talk to an owner who is an entrepreneur, whether it's my time now with the DRIPBaR or previously with F45. I think back then when I was a trainer, I always say this, because at heart, I'm a trainer, right? And so I always love helping people, talking to people, essentially helping them achieve their goals, right? That's why we do what we do. It's definitely not for the money. I can tell you that much. But I think, back then it's really about what was I most passionate about. And it was really working with kids. So working with athletes, because I'm an athlete myself, much like yourself. I played soccer through college, and for me, it was like we got to go out to a couple of schools back when I was younger. We did some like speed and agility training. I got lucky, like most of us do at some point in our career, where like one of the kids on the team, his dad was like the head coach at a big university here in New York, saw what we were doing and was like, "Oh, can you help us train our team?" And back then, I mean, much like yourself, right? Did they have a lot of speed and agility training back when you were training, or was it
No,
mostly like strength work and do some suicides after practice, right?
all strength work. And if it was agility, it was like, hey, we've got a couple cones and round them.
Exactly. And so, I had gone on to buy some like parachutes and harnesses and stuff that looked cool. I really didn't know much about it. And we just started to do it with some teams. They had some great success just in their seasons. Of course, I took full credit for that, but in reality, maybe it was luck. And one thing led to another. I ended up training about 42 high school and college teams,
Wow.
and all speed
Yeah,
and agility
athletes,
training
teams.
teams,
Wow.
right? So teams. And so Nike got wind of it. They were right about to launch a program called Spark, which is one of my favorite things in the world back then: speed, power, agility, reaction, and quickness. Wow. Wouldn't that be cool if we all had that? And if we trained that way? And so I was like a Nike Spark Master Trainer. I helped launch the global program. And we would go and do combines in a sense. You remember back then, I mean, really, NFL players are the only people that did combines.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing combines with basketball players, lacrosse players, soccer players. And it was really cool. And so it was that entrepreneurial spirit of essentially starting my own company. And then Nike came along and sponsored us. And from there, really, it was more about like just aligning myself with the right people as I grew my own career.
Listen, I went to one of those. And that's hysterical. So we're just gonna say at some point or another, you trained me.
You were
Um,
that standout star back,
that was
right?
me. Yeah, that was
You
me.
were wearing the Nike gear.
I
That
was.
was you.
Yep, I was the girl with the long hair wearing the Nike gear. But
Man,
that, you know, I'm obviously marketing through and through, and that is one of my favorite campaigns that Nike did with Spark. It was the campaign that my better is better than your better.
absolutely. Oh my God. Did you study that before you got on the?
I had did not. I did not. I kid you not. I remember it was like peak athlete days, and
Yep.
that campaign came out and it got me amped. It was the black and the green. I
Yes.
made my dad buy
We
the
had our own sneakers. We had apparel, which they weren't the best sneakers, but that's neither here nor there.
I made my dad buy the parachutes, and I made my brother like time me, and I didn't know what I was doing at the time. And
Yep.
then my dad was like, if you really want to do this, you should probably go to one of the combines. So sure enough, that's crazy. But yeah, my better is better than your better. I can still hear the commercial to this day.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna have to put it in the podcast now so people know what we're talking about.
I still use that equipment on an occasion where I make a guest appearance as a trainer. I pull out my Nike. I still have the Nike Spark bag with the hurdles that are collapsible, and I have laser cones with the timer. Unbelievable.
And it's funny because my goal all through college was I want to work for Nike. I want to work for Nike. That's where I want to work. I tripped into franchising and was like, this is
Oh yeah,
comfortable.
that's a
But
whole nother ball game.
everyone's connected. So, all right. So you kind of get the wind of the entrepreneur spirit. You're kind of starting your company now. You're got a global sponsorship with Nike. Now, talk me through the transition to the DRIPBaR.
Yeah. So this is what I say to every trainer. You come to a fork in the road at some point in your career. You're either going to continue to be a trainer, which
Mm-hmm.
is an absolute grind.
Yeah.
So at one point I was doing, I don't know, 220 sessions a month, and that's not sustainable. Or you can go into the managerial aspect of like the corporate side of the business of health
Mm-hmm.
and fitness, right? And so usually that means aligning yourself with some sort of back then big box gym, because really the only boutique franchises in fitness back then were like what, Soul Cycle and Barry's Boot Camp maybe back in the day.
Yeah.
And so I ended up working for Lifetime, which to me, for my career, I will always say that if you ever want to learn the business aspect of fitness and wellness, work at a Lifetime, because Lifetime has several ancillary streams of revenue. You're managing a budget of 300 plus K a month, 44 trainers on staff, selling everything from heart rate monitors to metabolic testing to personal training packages. it really makes you really business savvy. And so that really set the table for me to kind of go after some other industries and jobs. And then most notably, franchising was F45. F45 gave me the perspective of here's an up and coming brand that's scaling really fast, almost too fast in America because they're based out of Australia. And the chaos of that really prepared me for what I do now, which is working at the DRIPBaR, where we do IV vitamin therapy. First and foremost, we're a drip company, but we're scaling just as fast. We're opening up, I don't know, 4 or 5 a month. When I joined last year as the president, we were at 15 locations. We're at 72 now. We'll be at 100 by the end of the year. But the the franchising is franchising, right? It doesn't matter what you sell. It's like you have to have a competent owner. The owner has to always do two things: be willing to spend money on a great staff and be willing to spend money on marketing, right? You can't take any shortcuts there. And that really sets the table for them to not only be successful, but to grow month over month and hopefully eventually open up another location. And so, although we're in the medical aspect of wellness, the medical side of wellness, it's franchising is franchising, and it's still the ability to deal with a lot of passionate owners and help them grow in their own careers.
It's interesting because I always say typically the best leaders are the ones that have been not even in the weeds, like in the dirt, right? And a lot of that comes from, the hospitality business, but I think training as well. You are dealing with very intimate parts of people's lives and just a lot of people. I used to train, just youth athletes. And I would, have a 9 to 5, and then I would coach from 9 to 10 p.m., an hour long. And like that is a grind. And, I appreciate that thought of, there's a fork in the road. Do you do this, or do you stay in the business, or do you be the business, and
100%.
I think that that's a really great transition that I hope a lot of entrepreneurs have the experience with, because it gives you a more realistic perspective of business ownership. And I mean, a lot of times I think why this podcast works is because I'm a franchisee and was a franchisor. So I get that the difference of communication. So, you know, now, you're in the still the health and wellness sector, but more on the medical side. So was that a difficult change for you? I think a lot of people at some point in their career, maybe they stay in the industry, but it flip flops, right? Now I'm on the supplier side, or someone might go from quick service to full service restaurant. So you kind of went from the training more into like the medical. Was that a difficult switch? And what kind of differences do you see in terms of the concept?
Here's where the sales parity comes into every conversation in terms of like how do you be a successful franchisor and franchisee, which is to say that as long as I'm passionate about what we're selling, like extremely passionate, you and I have this fortunate ability later on in our career. We're not like 20 anymore, although you look 20.
I'll take it.
Yes, where like there's this aspect to like, okay, I don't need to take every single job, right? Like I could sort of be choosy.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I looked at what the typical clientele we catered to,
Hmm.
cancer patients, athletes, your everyday person that's stuck in a cubicle that just wants more energy. I understood that like I can really be passionate about this product. And so at that point it's just educating yourself like anything else, right? So
Yeah.
I mean even my time at F45, like I didn't do a lot of high intensity interval training myself.
Hmm.
But what do we all do when we start up a new career in a particular business? We go start taking hit classes. And so I
Right.
would try to visit as many F45s as possible. Two things I think someone from corporate looking at a franchise owner, what we need to do at a corporate level is immerse yourself as much as possible. And the number one thing I try to do, and it's my mantra with owners, is to be as accessible as possible.
Mm.
That means getting on calls, one-on-one weekly calls with people, running different, be in the market, from time to time on a quarterly basis. And I think if you were to ask an owner, although they might not agree with everything I do in terms of decision making, I do think there is this level of respect that I'm in the market, talking to them, hearing them, because at the end of the day, this, owners just want to be heard,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Just like a customer only wants to be heard, they don't want to be sold.
Right.
So I think that's where I align myself most definitely.
Yeah, and I think that the old stigma, or maybe, I don't even think there's a stigma for a reason, is that, franchising was very top down, and it doesn't need to be that way. And what you're saying is a perfect example of that, especially in the franchises, which most are, that you're managing people, whether you're managing a big staff or you're managing staff and clients, or customers. There always is a people aspect to that, and if you're not someone who can emulate good communication, then you're never going to get anywhere. No one wants to talk to someone who sucks at talking. You always have that one friend or that one person at the party that you're like, I can't do it. I don't want to talk to that guy.
And you're exactly right. And you know what's also is funny nowadays? It's like people are hesitant to pick up the phone. So like, and you know this, like both on the marketing side and as an owner side, sometimes we at corporate will send out emails that could have been a lot easier if we just picked up the phone and talked to the owner,
Right.
right? Because there's so much misinterpretation. I hate to email. I mean, I do it sometimes, but at the end of the day, I talk to all of our owners at least once a week, if they choose to get on a call with me, just from a support side. But that's the deal, because when a problem does arise, it makes it a hell of a lot easier to find the solution for it. And again, it's all about respecting an owner. They're putting their heart and soul and sometimes their life savings, right,
Mm-hmm.
into it. And sometimes, especially from a marketing standpoint, right? Like, I get if something's not on brand from a marketing standpoint, but like if they're struggling and you can make sense out of what you're about to do in terms of a post you want to put out there on Instagram or something to try and get customers, like, hey, I'm all for it. And so again, it always comes back to that communication.
And I think, this really drives a good point home, is that, so there was a time where I was working at the franchisor and I was with my who was boyfriend at the time, and the franchisor made a decision and they really thought like the owners were going to be so excited. I went home and told him about it. I was allowed to. And he was pissed because, XYZ, and I was like, "Oh, that's not this is what they meant to do and here's why." And he goes, "Oh, okay, well, now I get it." And I had to go back and tell the franchisor that. So to your point, there's a lot of miscommunication, but I think what it boils down to is that you have to build the trust. You have to with your franchisees so that they assume the best of your decisions.
Yes.
I think a lot of times franchisees get burned or they're not heard, to your point. And so when they make a decision and it's open to interpretation, they're not going to assume that you are making it in the best, with them in mind. They're going to assume the worst. And I think that that's a lot of kind of human nature, is to protect yourself and assume that it's a kind of a dog eat dog survival world. So it does take a lot of trust building so that when big decisions are being made, they will say, okay, you're not having me fall on the sword here. You're doing something, and maybe I don't have the full picture, but I know that Kory, I know that the team, they have my best interest at heart. So I think that that's really great. And pivoting a little bit, but still, like, to the people, how is the employee side of your business? Because until we did the fitness summit, I had no idea that the people that worked in the DRIPBaR were registered nurses. And I just had my kids in the ER, and like, healthcare is a grind. And so if I
Yeah.
was a nurse, I'd be like, hell yeah, I'm going to the DRIPBaR. So talk to me a little bit about that. And does it pose more of a challenge, or is it almost easier to get employees? Not that it's ever easy.
So two aspects to our sort of staff makeup, which is the RNs, the registered nurses first and foremost, but we do encourage owners to hire someone with sales experience to work the front part of the business. I think the biggest misconception is that, like, one, you don't want a penny pinch on hiring the right staff, which means you got to hire someone with sales experience, because at the end of the day, RNs are great. They're not the most comfortable to do call drives, call old leads that are sitting in the system, or when someone's done with a drip, maybe it would benefit them to be a member at the DRIPBaR and buy a membership, but like an RN isn't comfortable with that sales pitch, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the most important thing. Hiring RNs, unlike the fitness industry where we're hiring trainers and coaches, it's actually quite easy. When we put a job description out for an RN, we get 30 applicants in an hour. I'm not even exaggerating, because RNs typically are working in an ER.
Hmm.
absolute stress level, right? You were just there. I'm sure you met some wonderful RNs in the ER. And so they love coming to the Drip Bar. It is a luxury medi spa, and that's the feel and the look of it, right? And so hiring salespeople is a different story.
Mm.
And I think it will always be hiring the right person to really run the front part of your business in any business, whether it's an F45, an Orange Theory Fitness, a Hammer and Nails, who Aaron, you know as well as I do, the CEO of that company. Like that's to me, no one gets to the RN or no one gets to your fabulous trainer if you can't get them in the door in the first place. And so I always try to tell an owner to put the emphasis on hiring the right people on the front part of the staffing model, because if you don't, they're never getting to the back part of the house. And what frustrates me the most is when an owner thinks they can do that themselves. Like, listen, we have an owner from Salesforce. He worked at Salesforce for a while. Like, hey, I get it. You're a sales guy. No problem. You working at the front desk. But like Stacy, who's a doctor and has never owned a business before, and she's worked at a hospital and now she owns a drip bar. Like, you're not making 30 calls a day to customers that you're trying to get in to be a member, right? Like it's just not happening. So I don't know if you found that in your experience too, but that's what I come across every day.
Yeah, so especially, our most heavy employee franchise with Made Pro is, the we call them the pros, but the cleaners that come in, they're not expected to handle customer service. So we always make sure that whatever we're hiring for, the pay and the expectations align. And it's a lot of what you kind of coach in business too. You cannot expect your marketing person to be great at your numbers. You can't expect Twitter to produce a lot of leads. So it's, managing those expectations. Um, so because it's a more of a medical concept and you've got this RN and you've got these sales, people kind of intermingling,
Yep.
how do you manage culture? Because now you've got vastly different people that are, or personalities, and you're in the industry of wellness, but I think it can be tough, and especially it's a storefront, but it's a service, it's health, but it's also a sale. How do you kind of coach on that?
Yeah, so it's understanding, what the three pillars are of your sales cycle. So there's always people, product, and process, right? So we know who the people are because you hired them.
Mm-hmm.
The product's fantastic, right? Or at least we think so with the Drip Bar. So there shouldn't be any misalignment there. And so it's really about understanding the process. If everyone understands the process, it makes the culture a lot simpler. So what do I mean by that? So when you walk into a Drip Bar, the front desk people, let's call them the manager, for example, right? There's that intro process, right? Hey, Madeline, so nice to see you. You're here for your 10 o'clock. Was excited that I got to talk to you the other day. And I know you're looking for some energy. So, today's going to be a good day for you. What I'm going to do now is introduce you to Stacey, fabulous registered nurse. She's going to take care of you in the back. So we walk back there and that person does a nice little handoff to the RN. So everyone's on the same page. Once that's done, there's that hand back to the front desk. And that's just to say, Madeline, how'd you enjoy your drip today? Wasn't Stacy awesome? Yes, she was awesome. So let's talk about how we look at your overall wellness program going forward, right? Because everyone's on the same page, it makes culture just really in alignment. It's really when the front part of the house doesn't understand what the back part of the house is doing. And the last thing I'll say is your salespeople in any business need to also experience the product themselves. So how many times would I walk into a gym in my gym life career, and I would either speak to a front desk person or it would just come up in conversation where they don't even work out there. They don't want to be bothered there. They go down the road because they want to get their workout in there. I'm like, you got to work out at the place you're working at. If it's a gym, some of the time, like
Right.
it just, you have to immerse yourself in your products. So we have every front desk person, whether they're a manager or a sales associate, make sure that we give them drips on a monthly basis. Obviously, our ends experience it when they're going through the training process. So that's important too, right? You can't be passionate about something that you don't do yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it brings me to my last thing, which is anyone that knows me, I never go on a podcast or speaking appearance without giving my mantra phrase, which is people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. I wish I made it up myself. It's by the famous Simon Sinek, but it's true. And so when you're coaching an owner or coaching a staff, it's all about making sure they understand it's not about what we sell. It's not about, how we even do it. It's all important, but it's about if you can't communicate why it's so important for you to do this and why we do this on a personal level, it doesn't matter.
I adore that. And I think, if owners or even, potential candidates are listening in, I think the biggest takeaway too is in everything you're saying, obviously there's what Scott Abbott calls, the squishy stuff. It's the understanding people, the relationships, but you're building processes around that. Why is the culture great? Because the back of the house understands the front of the house. They stay in their lanes. So I think the more you leave it to people, and I am the biggest I don't want to say victim. I'm the biggest. I do this all the time and I shouldn't, because I take the personality assessments and I'm like a 99% D. I just go and do it. I'm going to figure it out. Don't mess around with the details. And a lot of times I'll assume other people are like that, where I can
Yep.
make decisions on the fly and just, I work quickly. And a lot of other types of people, that's not how they function. And so by me being like, it's fine, figure it out. No, that's not how we how we run a
Yep.
successful business. You want to make sure that you're buttoned up as possible. There's not a lot to, throwing back to our previous conversation, not a lot of room for interpretation, and setting it up for success. Now, Kory, I feel like I could talk to you forever. I feel like we've sat around, and drank wine and broke bread million times before. So I feel like I can ask you this and people will comfortably take your advice. What happens when it goes wrong? What happens if the culture is bad? You have a bad franchisee. The franchisee hires wrong. I mean, you have people injecting needles into people. So this is not something that we want to mess around with. So, what are your steps into ensure if something goes wrong, like a bad hire, a bad culture, a bad egg, how do you coach to that?
Well, customer experience is something I take really personal. That's why I wrote a book on it. And so it's a great question. I think it's why it's why I make it a mandate to have and go above and beyond in terms of support. So what that means is we make sure an owner has a multitude of calls per week. It doesn't mean they have to get on them all, but for example, we have weekly sales calls. We have weekly role play calls where we can role play stuff with their staff. We have mystery shop calls where we get on a call with everyone in the nation and we'll call another IV place or another fitness place and see how they react on the phone when we pretend to want to know pricing and things like that. We do that every single week, right?
That's so fun.
It's so much fun. And because we do all of that, we have this personal relationship with every single owner. And so when something does go wrong, it's very natural for me to pick up the phone and go, "Hey, John, it's Kory from corporate. I just want to discuss something with you and get your thoughts." Right. And we always throw it back to them because, we can't tell people what to do, nor would I as well. But I think if you're supporting your not only your corporate staff, but your owners in that way, it is a lot easier to find a solution to a problem that's gone wrong, right?
Mhm.
And so I'll give you a great example. This just happened yesterday. I get a call from our corporate team executive, and she tells me that we have a member at this one DRIPBaR that just had a really bad experience for whatever reason, whether they're making up the experience or not, because we always take stuff with a grain of salt. There's always two sides to the story. So I listened to her and I asked for their information and I got the information and I called the person. The person was blown away that I called them right away. This just happened like that morning. But I called the GM of the location as well because I know him personally. Why do I know him personally? He's on every single call every single week. And so it's very natural for me to have that conversation. Had I done nothing with that guy, and like they signed their franchise agreement, they've been open for 7 months and have never met the GM, it would be kind of awkward for me to call.
Mm.
And I would actually second guess myself and go, should I be calling the GM? I'm the president of the DRIPBaR. Like the owner really should be handling that. But because the owners and the GM know me so well, and I'm just use me as an example, it's not just me. It makes it very easy to curb that problem and turn it into a solution. And so that's one of the great things about sort of being in every position in my career. I always tell people like I started from the bottom, right? Just sweeping the floors at a gym, became a trainer, became an assistant department head, a regional director, so forth and so on, right? I've been in every situation. So when the GM is telling me about what the problem was himself, I can relate because I was a GM myself. So I think it gives me the unique opportunity to relate, to build that trust and rapport. Like you were saying before, you've been on both sides of the coin. No one's going to tell you something that you haven't gone through yourself.
Right. So I hear a lot of I'm able to call them. I picked up the phone. It happened this morning. I've got weekly calls. I call each owner, try to call each owner every week. I know a lot of execs are on here going, well, how the hell does he have time for that? And I know because I see a lot of president schedules when I'm trying to schedule
Yeah.
podcasts and it's back to back to back. So, how do you, one, have time for all of that? And two, with a lot of these standing meetings, I'm sure it would be very easy for you to just say, let's punt this. Let's not have it this week. Let's move it to monthly. What are your values around that to make, because as you grow, you're going to get busier.
Two answers for you. Number one is having a CEO that empowers his staff. So and listen, we've all worked for people that probably we weren't like yearning to wake up in the morning and go work for this person. I've certainly been there, but they were my boss and I had no choice, right? Our CEO, Ben, first of all, number one, he comes from fitness. So we kind of had this kindred spirit about like our fitness days, right? The old ward days back in the day. But he just leaves us alone. And that's the thing. And that's what we tell owners when we're talking about hiring the right people. It's the same thing for a company. Like you have to empower your staff. Like if he can't empower the president of the company, like what are we doing? And so that means that I can hire the right people around me. And so when I say I'm on calls, I'm absolutely on calls, but we also have a phenomenal director that's on calls as well as our marketing and operations team. And so, yeah, it's hard. I mean, we're going to be at 100 locations. I can't be on every call, but I trust the people that I've hired.
Yeah.
And by the way, people along the way is that have made impacts in my life. Our director of sales, I've known for 20 years. He was the first hire I made on the sales side of the business for the company because I just trust him and I love his energy. And he's been a GM, he's been a trainer, he's been a fitness manager. He's been there. And so again, it's easier when you're in the franchise business to hire people who've been in the trenches themselves. Because again, what does that do? It lets you enable that trust factor with an owner. An owner gets it when they know you've been there.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, like in terms of the medical and adapting to that side of the business, when owners saw me getting drips and posting stuff in drip bars all around the country, like I think that respect factor went up a little bit. And then when you marry that with getting on calls with them, I think that's what a good corporate person should do in the franchise business is again, be accessible and show them that you're passionate about what we're selling.
Yeah, and I think that they're with franchising. So I was on a panel the other day with Fox Rothschild and SMB, and we are talking about AI. And I was on right next to a partner in a law firm, and I was like, "Listen, Elizabeth, I am a walking lawsuit because I live in the gray area. Like, catch me in the loophole.
Yep.
I will find a loophole." And I think why I love franchising so much because it really is a gray area between work life and home life. When you're in that home office, yes, you have that corporate function, you're helping others, but at the same time, you're building relationships that transcend just work. And I think if you come into franchising or if you're in franchising and you expect to succeed and not build those relationships, I'm not saying, I mean, there's different levels, but if you expect it to completely be corporate and separate, I don't think you're going to succeed because that is just not the culture of franchising. I know we had a CEO that tried to come in and do that, and she was much more on the conservative on the relationship side. And it ended up not working out because the culture of sharing and trust just wasn't there. And so I love that story of, your first hire, you guys go way back. I mean, the guy who hired me at Made Pro, and I was, marketing manager, just he spoke at my wedding. That's the kind of relationships that franchising, lends itself to. And, instead of fighting it, finding a way to make it work with your brand and your personality, it's just going to lead to a more successful relationship. And people might say, that's great for emerging brands. It's not for my brand. No, it can be for anyone. I talked to the chief of franchising at McDonald's the other day, and he's saying the exact same things you're saying, Kory. Like, it is about the people you bring in. We are training them. I am on calls. So, it's really the fundamentals, just like in any sport. There's a fundamental of running. There's a fundamental of playing
Yep.
each sport that it doesn't vary because you're taller. This is, how you flex yourself around the successful pillars. And I think that's what makes franchising.
Well, I'll also say, I don't think you're a walking lawsuit. I think you're like me, whereas like we're just not afraid to take chances. And
Right.
again, that's what separates like someone that goes into franchising. You got to be a risk taker, whether you're on the owner side or you're working for, the corporate business side of it, because every owner is different. That's
Yeah.
the cool part, right? So, I mean, listen, when I worked for Lifetime or 24 Hour Fitness or Equinox, it's it's only one way.
Right.
That's it. Like everything has, I mean, and although we have a brand standard, especially from a marketing standpoint, which you probably relate the most to, it's like owners all have different personalities. And by the way, sometimes that means hard conversations. Right? Like, I'm not afraid to call an owner out. And by the way, I think they respect that because, like, how many times have you heard someone bitch about digital marketing? I'm spending $3,500 and I only got 30 leads this month. Great. You know that should only be like 10 or 20% of your total lead flow. Like 80% should be grassroots marketing. What are you doing for that? Have you
Right.
done any events yet? No, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, instead of focusing on like that, you should be focusing on this. And so I'm not, if you're, you know, secure enough in what you do and experienced enough in what you do, those conversations are hard, but they shouldn't be glossed over.
Yeah, I think there's a time and a place for gentle parenting, and I'm not
Yes.
knocking the gentle parenting. I don't know how people have patience for that, but I can tell you, my kids have a lot of leeway in our house. We have the party house. There's always kids here in and out. So we live in chaos, but they know if I give them a look or if I'm going to call their shit out, I mean, they'll tighten up real quick. And I think to your point that they want that. Franchisees are part of a franchise, just like kids. They're not going to tell
Yep.
you, give me boundaries. I want you to tell me when bedtime is. They do. And, that might mean hard conversations, but what's best for your brand is what's best for them. And, as they grow, as they get bigger and new people come in there, they'll understand that eventually. A lot of times I tell people, we have to remind the franchisees that while we're their parent, they only have one of us.
Yep.
We had triplets 97 times. So
Yep.
they have to remember they are one of many, and there's definitely a different management style. Well, Kory, I literally could talk to you all day, but I know we're coming up on time. So I have two final questions for you. I never prep people, not that you would ever need to be prepped anyways, but it's a two-parter. So if you had a piece of advice to give to a franchisee, what would that be? And if you had one piece of advice to give to a franchisor, what would that be?
Yeah. Number one would be, not be afraid to fail. You got to take chances. So from a corporate level, you got to be afraid to take chances and look to see what trend lines are, right? There's some, in the first of all, fitness is always evolving. But in my space and in my industry, we have to be looking at, what's down the road. Hormone therapy. Peptides are huge right now. And so doing our due diligence and seeing, getting ahead of the curve. From an owner standpoint, quite honestly, it's don't think with the budget. Like, we get it, I get it. There's a certain budget you're trying to stick within, but the advice I always tell people, it might cost you more, for example, to hire a particular person, but in the long run, it might bring in a lot more than what you're paying. And so you just got to be willing to not think with your wallet. It's hard. I get it. And how many times does an owner overspend because just construction now is more, timelines are different, post-COVID, things like that. But, so failing fast and not being afraid to fail fast, take chances, and ultimately stop thinking with your wallet, listen to some advice.
I'm literally trying to take that advice myself as a franchisee, and you're right, it is hard. But yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I like how you put it. You're actually the first one to put it that way. And I appreciate that as part of the podcast, because like we said, with personalities, people listen differently. And I think that is going to resonate with a lot of people. And before we sign off, I want to call attention to one more thing. As we were, figuring out what link was going to work, I noticed in your email signature that the DRIPBaR has changed the logo to include pink, and there's a pink ribbon. And first, I want everyone listening to this podcast to think, when was the last time you updated your email signature? Probably never, really. But to Kory's point and everything he talked about on here, he lives and breathes the brand, and he pays attention to the things that matter. You have updated your email signature to update this brand. And can you talk to me about why pink?
Well, Breast Cancer Awareness Month, first and foremost. But I think having a relationship with your marketing team is probably, for me, it's been the most painful and most joyous relationships I've had at every single company. I can tell you every single CMO, the relationship I've had with all of them, because it's a very unique relationship. And for those of anyone listening, what I mean by that is, like, their job is to make sure that you are on brand 100% of the time. My job is to make sure that every owner is successful. Sometimes those paths veer away from each other. And so there's this immense amount of respect that goes along with that. But the marketing that you do for your brand and your brand awareness could be the lifeline of your business, literally. And so everything we do with an eye on how does that affect the brand and what is the marketing strategy. And so our marketing team are phenomenal. So we pump out, probably something you're familiar with, a 12-month marketing strategy calendar, so owners know well in advance. And so things like Breast Cancer Awareness Month and things like that, we pay special attention to. And that means everything from our Instagram post to our LED droplet that's in every DRIPBaR becoming pink, to our email signature. And so we try to leave no stone unturned when it comes to how we represent ourselves into the community.
Well, Kory, thank you for walking us through that. Thank you for everything you do in franchising, and of course, what you're doing with breast cancer awareness. I'm sure that's near and dear to, unfortunately, many people.
Yep.
And I actually look forward to going in the DRIPBaR and seeing those cool pink lights, because
I can't wait till that fabulous RN. We put the needle in, you won't even feel it, and we start pumping some vitamins and minerals in you.
I am so excited. Well, Kory, thank you so much. We look forward to watching the DRIPBaR grow. If you guys want to connect with Kory, you can find him on LinkedIn. Of course, you can contact me and I'll hook you up. And also visit a DRIPBaR near you. If you're interested in DRIPBaR franchising, shoot a message to Kory, go on the DRIPBaR, or of course with me, and I'm happy to connect you with their team. Thanks a lot, Kory.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Art of Franchise Marketing. This show is brought to you by Netsertive. We help franchise brands and multi-location businesses run localized digital marketing at scale. To learn more, visit netsertive.com.